We have never witnessed anything like this, and it has only just begun. It is the most successful ETF launch ever. What are your thoughts on this, Dan? I'm not sure. Certainly not the very first steps. All it takes is the click of a button, and you can access trillions of dollars. Overall, these individuals are not traders. It is common practice for these RAI networks to advise their clients to consider allocating X% of their assets. Hey, we're going to take care of this for you all. They just put X% in or make it mandatory. It is done by them. After that, our pals have witnessed this entire thing with Dan and myself. Starting with 1%, they gradually go to 5%, and then they decide to go all in at 10% once they see how powerful it is. It is now official. Spot Bitcoin ETFs have finished. Their performance during the past 2 months of trading has been absolutely astounding. The most recent report from Bloomberg ETF analyst Eric Bauchunas shows that the assets of these ETFs have surpassed $55 billion with a trading volume of $110 billion, which is double that amount. Eric stresses the importance of this landmark, noting that it is particularly noteworthy for exchange-traded funds ETFs that have just been available for trading for 2 months. He said that he would consider these statistics successful if they were reached by year's end. Doing it in 8 weeks is completely ridiculous, as Eric pointed out on social networking platform X. According to the Bloomberg ETF analyst post from Monday, Bitcoin ETFs should have no trouble overtaking gold ETFs. He brought attention to the fact that in only 2 months, spot Bitcoin ETFs will surpass gold ETFs. Eric elaborated by saying that these ETFs are now up against much bigger categories and that they will probably find winning gold too easy. They will next aspire to beat even bigger categories in sectors and smart beta. In just over a month, the combined value of these 10 exchange-traded funds ETFs has risen from $110 billion in trading to $55 billion, virtually doubling their holdings. Their recent surge in value puts them on track to overtake gold ETFs in terms of market capitalization in the next few months, not years. Despite Eric's jubilation at the new Bitcoin ETFs from BlackRock and others, Real Vision's Raoul and 10T Holdings' Dan Tapiero are of the opinion that Bitcoin ETFs have a lot more in store. According to Tapiero, this is just the very beginning. This is the first step toward the completion of the process by which this massive Cincinnati real estate developer will then inject, $5 million into the ETF. Here is the procedure. It is, in fact, quite sluggish. Many of these individuals are motivated just by cost, and we have only just begun. Yes, I understand. What you see in the video is how much keeps itself fed. Soon it's second nature. Thus, we have only just begun. Overall, these individuals are not traders. You should consider about an X% allocation. These RAI networks usually tell their clientele. They promise to do it for you and either set aside X% or make it mandatory. It is done by them. After that, our pals have witnessed this entire thing with Dan and myself. 1% is where they begin. Prior to that, they receive up to 5%. Fuck it is their attitude. They are beginning to grasp the magnitude of this, so we are heading to a 10% increase. In terms of price movement, it thus becomes highly reflexive. Family offices are something I've seen. Big Australian family offices are among my fund's investors. Their initial allotment was 1%. In the end, they likely allocated 20% of their funds to cryptocurrency since, once the principal started to grasp it, it just multiplies. Even more so, the price behavior is based on it. According to Dan, we are still in the very early stages. A dollar cost average is something that a lot of individuals will do too. Thus, this is. Every quarter for the following several, someone will announce, okay, I'm going to 3%, and they will add 0.5% to that. As a result, I believe that many individuals buy items such as that. Nobody is. Oh, absolutely not. Okay, put 5 million in? Very few people do that. This is a total high. I could care less. As you may be aware, many of those men will. This leads me to believe that many of these purchases have stories behind them. Furthermore, there are these. Suddenly, that asset allocation mix included big platform models like Morgan Stanley, BlackRock, Fidelity, and JP Morgan. Those individuals also have control over assets worth about $1 trillion. So after they do it, the process is the same. Then, dollar cost averaging begins. Plus, we've noticed that BlackRock has mentioned the possibility of doing that. It hasn't even begun yet, in my opinion. Large sums of money also begin to pour in. This has nothing to do with organizations. As of right now, not a single institution has gone in. Another major element in the US is the 401k plan. Millennials add to their 401k of this things every 2 weeks, which is one reason passive funds have outpaced active portfolios like NASDAQ and SP keeps outperforming. Bitcoin can now be added to their 401k plans. Accordingly, it turns into an eternal bi-weekly bid. That doesn't rule out its cyclical ups and downs with the economy, but the public is confused by the massive structural shift. I've been requesting this since the first quarter. I had assumed the worst had happened by the end of Q42. At conferences and on Twitter, I made my feelings clear. Additionally, the first half of 2023 was incredibly positive. In my opinion, this is only one of many highly encouraging indicators. Not even the halving has taken place yet. I see there's more to it than that. Not even a helpful macro backdrop has materialized thus far. There has been no cut by the Fed as of yet. Do you believe Bitcoin will be worth $70,000 if the Fed funds rate is set at 5%? That's something you could have told me. For what it's worth, I would have assumed it could wait for a while. I see. If the Federal Reserve takes some action, the Bitcoin price might wait a bit. The market is already priced in a slowdown in inflation, and the Fed is simply following the market rather than the other way around. As someone who is interested in macroeconomics, that is my own opinion. That is somewhat unexpected. Despite our presence, one of the primary motivators has not yet activated. Another topic up for discussion is the Ethereum ETF, which I believe is highly likely to materialize. And that is still in its early stages. To be fair, there are a great deal of positive underlying factors. A 5% interest rate is not going to deter you from investing in an asset that averages a yearly increase of 100%. I see. Assets are driven by liquidity even when it's immaterial, so liquidity did improve, but the cycle is still in its early stages, as Dan correctly pointed out. Finally, the Chinese are currently experiencing what amounts to debt deflation. A lot of money is going to be printed. Cuts will be made by the Fed. Cuts will be made by the Europeans. A few banks will likely be bailed out by the Fed. Playing the game is the point, A vote is coming up and we need to pay the electorate. It is common practice to implement a fiscal stimulus immediately following an election. Probably implement a stimulus program if Trump is elected. The distribution of funds is widespread, The shocking part is that we actually had a strong run before to the halving. The macro season has just begun, but that is all that matters. For me, the macro is what drives the cycle. This long-term trend has persisted for the past 3.5 to 4 years. The cycle is identical throughout the board, therefore I fail to perceive any rationale for the cycle to alter until we construct a peculiar crypto monster or encounter an exceptionally robust cycle. Every cycle has its strengths and weaknesses. Also, I felt the last cycle was too short. In my opinion, the next leg ought to have been higher. In my opinion, it ought to have reached 100, but it fell short. Also, I believe that causes PTSD in some people. Therefore, I believe they are afraid of making the same mistake twice and being overly aggressive. Worry about a repeat of 2013 when it had a slight decline is, in my opinion, more widespread. Seems like it's over for everyone. Then it increased by another factor of 4, for some reason foolish. In my opinion, the bubble cycle now has a better chance of success than this left translator. Everyone gets PTSD when you ask them about the left translated, no matter how much I try to explain it. In your opinion, how much longer does this macro cycle have left to run? I would appreciate your thoughts on the macro cycle. According to all the code work I've discussed in detail, it should be somewhere near the end of 2025. Is it possible to have it a bit early now? However, every time the crypto cycle ends, it is in November or December.